This is the Good Government Show.
You're always looking for a free lunch in government, and they're not always there, but sometimes there are. Sometimes there are things where you think, wow, why didn't we do that years ago? I think that the business of government is not economic prosperity. I think that that is only a proxy for what the real business of government is, and that is human flourishing. In America, we have really impoverished our language around government. We tend to talk about everything as though it's about economics. And sadly, I'll even have arts groups come in, and they'll come in with an economic study that shows that whatever art they want to do is good for the economy. Well, I think that's putting it backwards, and I think that's true for education too. Government is got a really strong bias towards yesterday wasn't a calamity, therefore let's make tomorrow look like yesterday.
Big ideas, new ideas, good ideas. The mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan wants to hear them all. He has a few himself, and he likes to hear other ideas. Get ready for a wide-ranging conversation. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm Dave Martin. First, help us share the message of good government by liking us and sharing us where we are on social media. Make sure to review us and share our show everywhere. We all need to talk about good government. David LeGrand is in his second year as mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's the state's second largest city. It's also known as Beer City, so we talk about that. A former prosecutor, we talk a lot about criminal justice reform. Mayor LeGrand has a new idea about how to stop crime before it happens. It's a good idea. He also thinks we need to change the conversation about guns. The city police have been effective in getting illegal guns off the street, but the mayor says we need to think about guns differently to make not just his city, but all cities safer. While Mayor LeGrand hasn't solved the housing problem, he does have a program that will add more apartments in Grand Rapids, and the work is more than half done. So coming up, a conversation about housing, guns and safety, and beer with Grand Rapids Mayor David LeGrand. HelloNation is our partner here at the Good Government Show. This is a new direction from CGI Digital. HelloNation is CGI's new online digital magazine that showcases the best of cities across the nation. We'd all prefer if good news traveled faster. At HelloNation, positive stories don't just get told, they get amplified. HelloNation helps businesses, leaders, and communities share positive stories that matter, building trust, credibility, and meaningful connection. Through professionally produced podcasts, digital features, and targeted distribution, HelloNation positions you as the answer regular folks are looking for, while expanding and scaling your digital footprint across the platforms that people trust. Good news deserves momentum. Your city or your business can help spread the word of good news across the nation. At HelloNation, they don't have advertisers, they have advertisers. Editorial content from trusted community leaders and cities that are spreading the good news. Let HelloNation lift you up and lead the conversation. That's HelloNation. Once you wrap up this episode of the Good Government Show, give a listen to our friends over at Good News for Lefties. This daily podcast highlights news stories that show there's more good news out there. Other people in government are really trying to do the right thing. That's Good News for Lefties. Listen where you're listening now. Welcome to the Good Government Show. I'm happy to finally have with me Grand Rapids Mayor David LeGrand. A little trouble getting us together, but we're finally together and we're talking about all things Grand Rapids. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So we are talking with the mayor of Grand Rapids, who's been a year and a half in the job. And I recently saw something where you talked about, here's a quote from you. You said, "In my first year as mayor, I've learned a lot." So tell me, Mr. Mayor, what have you learned?
Well, one thing is I learned that I've got a really big microphone. You're on the top of a pyramid when you're mayor. I was a state representative before this, and if you're one of 100 people, the press doesn't hang on your every word, and people don't extrapolate from random comments. Whereas when you're mayor, there's no such thing as an off-the-cuff remark. The press is going to report on it. So, if you say something like, "Gee, why are parking rates cheaper on the street than they are in our ramps?" that's going to turn into the media saying the mayor wants to raise parking rates. So very small things can get amplified if you're not careful.
Did you say that, Mr. Mayor?
I did. Laws of supply and demand, right? Like your street parking. So there's a great book by a guy, one of my heroes wrote a book called The High Cost of Free Parking. And, if you look at parking rationally, it can't be both infinite and cheap. And if you are in a city, your goal can't be to build, suburban infinite surface parking lots. They're just a bad idea.
Right.
And so you want to incentivize people to do the parking behaviors that you want them to do. And in a capitalist society, we use market forces to do that sometimes quite well. But, we have some underutilized ramps and some overutilized street parking in our downtown. And, one way to solve that is with pricing. But you say that and everyone hears, sometimes there are some things like, for example, the price of gas is such a political bellwether. If your price of, core housing goes up, policy wonks talk about it. But if gas goes from $3 to $3.50, you'd think the world was going to end. Even though if you do the math, then it's maybe $100 or a $200 difference in somebody's annual budget, assuming they're not massive commuters. Housing costs are a whole lot more important than gasoline prices if you're looking at somebody's total budget.
Sure.
Almost always.
Well, you brought it up, so I'll ask you, what are you doing about parking and parking prices in Grand Rapids?
Sure. Well, I think the first
And remember,
answer,
this is the Good Government Show, so good luck with good government on parking.
Yeah, exactly. I think that one of the things that we are exploring, which is geeky and I love, you're always looking for a free lunch in government. And they're not always there, but sometimes there are. Sometimes there are things where you think, wow, why didn't we do that years ago?
You have heard of the expression, there's no free lunch, right?
Yeah, of course, but sometimes there is.
Okay.
So, for example, if you look at, and I'm going to get off topic, but I spent most of my career working in criminal justice. And getting rid of a cash bond system gives you a free lunch in the sense that you don't ruin a bunch of people's lives. You can just make things better with no downside of losing public safety if you use a public safety assessment when you let people out rather than a wealth assessment. It's just it's not a good way to screen for public policy. So that's a free lunch in the justice space. Well, a free lunch in the parking space looks like this. 50 years ago, we didn't have some of the technology we've got now. We didn't have the ability to do Uber, for example. Well, you can kind of do Uber for parking. You can map out all of the parking lots that churches and businesses have that they use pretty intensively during the day, the businesses, but may not use it all at night. Well, if you can get an app that shows people where those lots are, and you can get collaborative agreements signed with the city for revenue, you can open up thousands of event spaces for things like concert performances and hockey games and all of that kind of stuff. So,
well, you have to get a big buy-in from the community and from the business leaders, because I can tell you now, I live in New York City. So disclosure there, where parking is not easy anywhere. But I can't tell you the number of places I've been to where they have big signs that say parking for, this store exclusively, parking for this bank exclusively, all others will be towed. How do you get people to come on board with opening up their space to people who aren't using either their business or their parking lots?
Well, if they're not using it, it's money lying on the ground waiting for somebody to pick it up, to put it simply. So take, for example, I own a distillery. Got a parking lot with like 60 spaces in it. They are not utilized during the day. So if I could figure out a way to monetize that low use during the day, and I had, again, if you use an app, I could turn that availability off at night, which is when I want people to come to my distillery and eat dinner and have a drink. It's very low use during the day. Now, conversely, if I'm an insurance company and I got 20 employees who all want to be there 9 to 5, well, at 5:30, those parking spots have no monetary value to me. So if there's an app that would let me capture revenue from that, why would I not want to do that?
Has this been successful?
We're working on the app part of it right now.
Okay.
I mean, it's not something. Now I know.
Hey, listen, I think this is a great idea. I just I have not seen this work anywhere in cities. Is this in operation in places?
I don't know that I've seen it in other cities, but it makes logical sense to me. I mean, if you grab an Uber, you don't know who's coming. You just know that a car is coming, and you don't care that much. You're not making a contract with an individual person. You're using a system that can allocate out resources really efficiently. Well, similarly, if I'm going to a concert, I don't care where I park as long as I can get a parking spot. I know how much it's going to cost before I get there, and I know how far it is away from my venue. So it's an open source way to deal with parking demand.
So you had mentioned this, and this is sort of, I think, what you sort of ran on initially, is the fact that you were a prosecutor for a very long time. So you're well familiar with criminal justice and the wheels of criminal justice. One of the things that you talked to me about a little bit before we turned the microphones on was criminal justice reform. And I think you had said that you were successful in doing some diversion programs. What are these programs? Let's talk about good government and, why does a former prosecutor make a good mayor?
So, to answer the last part of that question, I often think cities have sort of foundational blocks or, footings or whatever you want to say. So you can say, what makes a successful city? And you look at a city like Boston, you think, well, education is really important, medical systems are important, tech's important, all of those things feed into their economy. But if you look at any city and you ask, what are the foundations for a city? Public safety is one. And I think probably a K-12 educational system that parents are going to buy into is number two.
Sure.
And if you don't have those, people are going to leave. Nobody wants to sacrifice their children to experiments or risks. They want their kids to be as secure as they can, and nobody wants to feel unsafe when they're going about their life. And so cities have to have floors for solid floors for public safety. So that's something I'm very aware of. Now, the trick in that space when you start looking at it is if your goal is public safety, there are lots of things that we don't do very well that we could do better. Lots of them. So, for example, if somebody is accused of a misdemeanor and they go in front of a judge and the first thing the judge says is, how much money do you have when determining whether to let them go home or not? That's a really lousy way to screen for risk. You should be asking, is there a risk of releasing this person out in the community?
Are they a danger to the community? I mean, that's the basic.
Exactly. You should be using a risk assessment, not a wealth assessment. So the fact is we developed a cash bond system in the Middle Ages when we had circuit riding judges in England, and it's a bad model for evaluating risk. It's a good model if you're, if you're in Salisbury and the judge only shows up every 3 weeks on a horse, and he says, "Give me a pig so that I'm sure you're going to come back next time." If you're worried about people appearing in court and you want collateral and you can use a pig, fine. But that's the Middle Ages. Right now, we've got way better tech for making sure people show up in court. We got way better tech. I mean, shoot, everybody in my family knows where I am right now because I'm talking to you on my phone. We can track people with their phones. We can do all kinds of things that we couldn't do in the Middle Ages. So one of the things I'm very excited about, and here's my pitch for your listeners. And I hope every mayor in the country copies this idea. So
we like to share best practices, so go ahead. I'll make sure all the mayors are listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, so here's the pitch. There are thousands, and in my town, there are about 3,000 misdemeanors that get convictions a year. Now, what that means is there's also then a huge category of, let's say you and I'm going to, just for fun, bear with me.
Sure.
You and I get in a screaming match on a street corner, right?
Right.
And I insult your clothes and you insult my nose, and we both scream at each other and we walk off in different directions. And you call the cops and you say, "I want Mayor LeGrand arrested." And well, okay, the cops are going to show up. And then when I ask you why, you say, "He insulted my clothes and I consider that a verbal assault." Well, what are the cops going to do at that point? They're going to pat you on the head. They're going to explain to you that no, insulting your clothes is not a crime. And then they're going to go on their way. Because our officers are not social workers, and they're not going to follow up in a week and be like, "Hey, how you feeling about that? Are you still mad at Mayor LeGrand?" They don't do that, right? They are in the business of identifying crimes, apprehending the perpetrators, and we hope deterring crimes with their presence. But primarily, they're in the apprehension and determination business. So if there's no crime that's been committed, their response intuitively and traditionally is, "My job is done here," right? "My work is done."
Right.
Well, okay, that's fine. But if we have 3,000 misdemeanor convictions, we probably have, and I'm going to make up the number, let's say we have 10,000 cases, and let's call them subclinical cases to steal some medical terminology. Those are cases where so what do you know about that case where you and I are mad at each other? Well, maybe we've got good problem-solving skills, and maybe we call each other and apologize half an hour later, and I would hope you and I would. But there are a lot of people out there who don't, and either because they're scared of reinitiating that conflict, or they just don't have the right problem-solving skills, or for whatever reason. Now, maybe that means tomorrow you don't feel like the cops gave you what you wanted, and you see my car and you key it. And then after I see you key my car, I escalate to something else, right? So that subclinical conflict can grow. I mean, we've all seen those stories.
Sure. Maybe
they de-escalate, but 100% of them aren't going to. So if on
this is why people get shot over a parking space.
Exactly. And it can fester, right? And it can come back 2 weeks later.
Right.
So imagine if you had a trained mediator, a conflict resolution person, and imagine if on your police report, the officer could tick a box that said, I think that would benefit from a follow-up. And a week from now, he calls me up and he calls you up, or he or she, the mediator, and says, hey, are you guys still pissed? And if so, would you like a chance to work it out? Well, the worldwide stats from the restorative justice space tell you that 80% of the people who are the wrongdoer in that situation, let's say I started it and I insulted your clothes first, and it was really me that picked the fight, and you responded by insulting my nose. So 80% of the people who are wrong, who started the thing, will be like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was an obnoxious move. I would love to sit down and say I'm sorry. And 80% of the people who have been aggrieved would like to get an apology. They'd like to be like, yeah, you were a jerk, but I shouldn't have said that about your nose either. And I'm sorry too, right? Well, if you can put those people in that space where they can resolve that conflict, you're not guaranteeing you're going to prevent a future crime, but statistically, you do enough of those, and there's going to be some of those cases that would have festered and would have escalated. So if you want to prevent crimes, you've got thousands and thousands of subclinical indicators of beefs, right? Arguments that are out there. So you're not going to random citizens. You're going to those, somebody thought there might have been a crime, but then there wasn't. Well, those are pretty serious tracers of potential future conflicts.
Okay.
So why not go mediate those? Why not identify them and offer the people involved a chance to work out their grievances?
So I see where you're going with this. I think this is a good idea. It's a way to prevent crime when you see that maybe there's a chance for a crime to start. Are you sending out social workers with police officers, or are police officers having social workers respond immediately?
Well, okay. First of all, yes, we are already doing that. But I'm talking about the cases where everyone kind of walks away and they're like, we're done with this. The social workers who we're sending out right now, we're using a co-response model, and there's sort of layers to this. You can use a co-response model where you send social workers out with officers. Usually what you're dealing with there is mental health cases. Somebody's decompensating, they're having a bad day, they're having a mental health episode. That's an area where a social worker is really helpful. But I'm talking about cases like your and my case.
Okay.
That's one where the cops are going to come out because you said LeGrand assaulted me. Well, this can go. There's a lot of places. Neighbor disputes. Somebody's putting garbage on somebody else's property, or a dog is running back and forth, or somebody doesn't like the fact that you parked in front of their house when their car belongs in front of their house. And they live down the block. I would imagine there's probably a lot of disputes with business people who share a strip center, kind of idea. So these are the kinds of things you're talking about. Is that fair? Exactly. Now, you could use a social worker for it, but really what you need is a mediator. And in my experience, a lot of those folks will actually be lawyers by training. Because lawyers, the guys you see on billboards on the side of the highway are all saying, I'll fight for you.
Yes.
But lawyers are really good at resolving things. Almost, if you look at the criminal space or the civil space, most disputes get resolved. And the lawyers...
They want to settle.
Right. So imagine this is a form of settling a future crime. I mean, it's a weird way to look at it. But so when we get we're in the process of crafting a job description for this mechanism and getting it in place. And if we do it, now here's the other, and I'm sorry, this is geeky, but you've got a good government show. So here's the geeky part.
Yes.
This also kind of is tailor-made for a double-blind study, because you could take, if we're going to get more input than the people you have could possibly handle. So let's say you have, 5,000 referrals from your police department. You're going to have to sort those. Well, if you said, okay, we're going to put some of these into the no response pile, which is essentially the placebo pile if it was medicine, and some of them into the respond pile, when you're done at the end of a while, you can look at those and be like, oh, the ones we did mediation on, we had 5 less adverse events afterwards than our control group. Well, then you've really demonstrated the value of what you did, right? In a way that so often when we're trying to do things, we don't really have a control group. So we can't, because we don't use control groups for things like for really bad things we want to solve, right? So you wouldn't use a control group for preventing a murder or stopping a bank robbery or something like that. But on these low-level cases where there has been no crime that's been committed, and if your basket of referrals is bigger than the resources you have, at least right away, to devote to it, you will then prove the value of this position. And then if you can say, like, oh, look, we hired a mediator, and the group they dealt with had 10 less assault cases come out of it. Well, okay, how much do you want to pay to prevent an assault? I'd pay a substantial amount of money. I would, because the trauma to the victim, like one of the bad things about government is it wants to monetize everything. So when we look at the criminal justice system, we tend to talk about the cost of prosecution, the cost of representation for the defendant, the cost of the judge, the cost of the jail cell. We don't talk about the cost of being traumatized because there's no easy dollar figure to put on it. But like you being assaulted is something you probably are going to carry around with you for the rest of your life. It's something that really, really follows people. So being able to prevent that, it's hard to know how big a dollar figure I'd put on it, but I'd put a pretty big dollar figure on it.
So let's talk about another aspect that you've talked about a little bit, which is rethinking gun ownership and gun possession. What can a mayor do about that? I read that you, I think last year you took 481 illegal guns off the street. What else are you doing about, gun reform and gun ownership? Yeah,
I think this is an area where many, many liberals have gotten into a bad headspace where they sort of think, the government should solve this problem for me. Look, if we didn't have a Second Amendment and if we didn't have all the Supreme Court rulings that we have, we'd be in a different place. But even there, I think that one of the things that liberals have to get back in touch with is the idea of community accountability and community responsibility. And this is, sort of the Norman Rockwell vision of like how a community gets along, right? Like if you're going to do the right thing, you also expect your neighbor to do the right thing. And, if somebody dropped a pop can in front of me on the sidewalk, I'm inclined to say, hey man, pick up your pop can, right? We do a little bit of that public accountability. Well, I think within the gun space, what we really should be looking at is the success of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So you're old enough and I'm old enough to remember the phrase "one for the road," which in today's world sounds insane, right? It sounds psychotic. The idea that you would be at a bar and say, hey, I'm about to drive a car. Can you make me more inebriated?
Yes.
Right? But there were songs about it. I think Marvin Gaye had a song, "One for the Road." But in our living memory,
yes,
that was a thing people said in bars. Well, what happened? Mothers Against Drunk Driving came along and started pointing out the carnage. They started pointing to the corpses. They started pointing to the incredible human cost, and changed our cultural attitudes around drinking and driving. People may still do it, but nobody's proud of it. And nobody's admitting it to their spouse when they go home, right? And it really has changed the world, and it's really improved things. Well, similarly, right now in our society, I see a whole lot of pro-gun messaging. I see it on the backs of lots of vehicles,
Yep.
People broadly proclaiming how much they love their guns and how important they are to them.
And they send Christmas cards with their family holding assault rifles, yes.
Right. And given that Jesus was clearly a pacifist and clearly had an opportunity to take up arms in the biblical account, the fact that, Christianity has now somehow gotten associated with gun use is something that just astounds me. It's hard to read the book and understand how you got from point A to point B, but that's another story. In the meantime, I think that culturally we just have to say, look, let's start pointing out that many of my friends who have guns sort of have the boogeyman vision. It's that they have the gun because someday they're going to meet the boogeyman, and then they're going to need their gun, and their gun is going to be useful. And I think we just have to have a
And the number of time that happens, I think, is incredibly low, correct?
Vanishingly small. So it turns out almost always the gun is going to be the thing that somebody picks up in a domestic dispute and things go really horribly, sideways.
Right.
Or it's going to be the thing you use when your kid comes home after a night drinking and sneaks in and you think he's a burglar. So there are all kinds of, accidental gun deaths are a horrifying thing, but they also turn disputes into tragedies, right? Again, that example of you and me yelling at each other, right? Well, if we go our separate ways, fine. There's a limit to how much can go wrong. But if one of us has a handgun and, imperfect self-control, things can go tragically wrong very quickly. My last murder in our city was a couple kids getting into a beef about who was going to get to join a soccer game. And all of a sudden somebody's dead.
Wow.
And getting, so, the question is like, can we talk to our kids? Can we talk to our brothers? Can we talk to our coworkers and drum in that reality? So I think that gets back to the big microphone question. If we can talk about this huge, huge social cost of having normalized gun possession. Now, the problem is that it's almost a religion. And the people who are invested in their possession of guns are really, really invested in them. And so the question is, how do you talk about this in the language of love? How do you encourage people to modify their daily habits without condemning?
And as I understand it, I read a little press clippings about you. Is you made a comment about basically what we're talking about, and the people of your city reacted strongly to some of your words.
Yeah, of course, and of course some of them will. This is an issue that really, really divides America. But you're never. I'm sure the first time anybody said, don't drink and drive, there was that kind of reaction too. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. This is America. I'm fine, right? I can handle my alcohol. All of those arguments are, you have to start somewhere. You have to start the conversation. And my thought experiment a few years ago was I've seen a lot of pro-gun bumper stickers on vehicles. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a bumper sticker that said, hey, have you thought about how much damage this does?
You need a little catchier little phrase there, Mr. Mayor, I think, in that.
Well, no, I have two bumper stickers. One that says, guns turn arguments into tragedies. All right. And the other bumper sticker says, guns kill people you love.
Okay. All right. Well, you did it. You got pithier statements. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that I understand is an issue in Grand Rapids. You've got a rapidly growing city. I think I read somewhere that you're the number one city on the rise, at least in Michigan.
Yep.
And apparently you're leading a charge to convert basically garages to apartments. Explain this a little bit.
Yeah. So there is now, again, this is not a New York City idea. Maybe that's going to have huge traction. Although New York's a big enough place. You've got Queens. You've got places where people have garages.
Yes.
But, it's not all Manhattan, no matter what the rest of the country thinks. But in a city like Grand Rapids, we've got about 200,000 people, which means probably 100,000 houses. A lot of those are going to have a garage. So Let's say half of them have garages. So you got 50,000 garages in your community. Well, a garage already has 4 walls, a roof, and a floor, which means you're a decent way along to making that into a habitable structure, right?
Right.
Now, it probably doesn't have HVAC, and maybe it doesn't have a sewer and water connection, but you've got a lot of already sunk costs. And a typical 2-stall garage is 600 square feet. Yep. Well, that's not a bad apartment. My son's living in Brooklyn in a 300 square foot apartment. He would, he would kill for a 600 square foot apartment.
Yes, he would. Yes, he would.
Ground floor, right?
Yep.
And that's the other thing about garages is they're great for people aging in place because, if you can drive a car into it, you can also ride a wheelchair into it. Yep. So they're incredibly handicap accessible sort of already. They're already there. And since housing costs are a national crisis, there's not one thing to do here, and I don't want to oversimplify, right? There's probably 20 things we need to do in this space. But one obvious thing we can do is take some resources we already have, which is garages, And if we can convert them into apartments and living spaces affordably, laws of supply and demand are just going to mean that they'll have a positive effect on making housing more affordable.
Doesn't that mean, though, that you have to change zoning laws? And are you doing that in your city?
Well, no, the advantage we have is we already said you can have ADUs by right in the city. So I'm now working on
ADU you just said?
Sorry, accessory dwelling units.
Okay.
Converting your garage to an apartment, we already can do that in our whole city by right. You don't have to ask permission. We did the zoning change to make that happen. So I'm now in the more granular question of like, okay, it's permissible. Why aren't more people doing it? And so some of that is, can you go get a loan from a bank easily? So I'm talking with banks about how to get programs for financing, because nobody buys their house with cash. There's no reason to think they're going to build garage conversion with cash. People are going to want loans to do that. And then granular things like, can you put windows on them? And do you have to change the fire code a little bit to allow that? So I'm working on some state legislation to allow windows on the sides of these things, allow the water and sewer hookups to be more affordable, and some foundational workarounds to state code. The intent is to drive the cost of conversion lower, because the cheaper it is to convert, the cheaper it is going to be to rent them out. You know, if I can do a conversion for $100,000, I can rent that thing out for $800 a month and really be happy I did it.
All right. Well, that does sound like good government. A couple of things I want to ask before we get to the questions, because I have a questionnaire I want to get to. How is the Gerald Ford Museum?
Oh, it's great. It's right on the river. And since we're doing so much river work in general, I think that it's only going to get more and more attractive, because we've got a real greenway that we're developing around it. We're also just getting more stuff around it. When the Ford Museum was built, there was a lot of surface parking lot around it. Now it's going to be smack up next to our new soccer stadium. So it's going to be in a context, and we're going to get more and more housing around it. So it's a fun museum, but it's going to get a lot more fun over the next few years.
All right. And I wanted to mention you've got a new amphitheater. Tell me why this is a good use of government money. Why is this government dollars well spent to build an amphitheater?
Well, first of all, we didn't use government dollars on it. That's the first answer. We bonded for the parking lot, and we did what's called a revenue bond, which is kind of like, you know, a mortgage on a rental property. The parking ramp's going to get revenue, and the revenue from the parking ramp will pay for the bonds. So maybe we're wrong. Maybe no one will go to hear the Doobie Brothers, but assuming that people keep going to hear the Doobie Brothers.
Wow, you are old.
Yeah, no, Doobie Brothers are my guys, and they are coming.
All right, okay.
And Weird Al.
Yes, Weird Al is on a national tour. All right. Well, did you get the river cleaned up?
Yeah, I mean, cleaned up. It's not so much cleaned up as made accessible. Our river's never really been dirty, but it's been behind a bunch of flood walls, because rivers go up and down a lot.
Yep.
And so historically, we built a lot of concrete 20-foot tall walls for river surges, and we're converting those to things that look like Greek amphitheaters, sort of stepped up access to the river so that you can get to it around the year round. And I'm still waiting for the boathouses along the river. My goal is 10 years from now, we want to look a lot more like Charles in Boston. I want to have 10 people out there on sculls making me wish I knew how to scull.
All right. Well, we're going to come back and talk with Mayor David LeGrand of Grand Rapids, Michigan, right after this. The Good Government Show is sponsored by Our. That's OUR for Our Community. Get involved. We hear that all the time from government leaders. Our co-brands with your government's name and logo. Your staff and the people you serve are connected and part of your community. From any device, your members provide reliable data and meaningful feedback. Ask a question like, do we want more parkland or better homeless services? More engaged conversations come through the Our app. Visit Ourco, that's OURCO.com, and book a demonstration. After you get done with this episode, hear more good government stories with our friends at How to Really Run a City. Former mayors Kasim Reed of Atlanta and Michael Nutter of Philadelphia, and their co-host, journalist and author Larry Platt, talk with guests and other mayors about how to really get stuff done in cities around the nation. Check them out where you're listening now or through their nonprofit news site, thephiladelphiacitizen.org/podcasts. Across America, there's a growing demand for leadership that delivers results. The Good Government Institute brings together proven ideas, principled leaders, and real-world solutions. We talk about what works. We talk about the best in government and in public service. On our flagship podcast, The Good Government Show, we talk about what makes good citizens. Our guests are government leaders who share great ideas and what public service means to all of us. Visit goodgovinstitute.org to learn more. That's goodgovinstitute.org. So, Mr. Mayor, we have a questionnaire that I ask all big city mayors, or government leaders across the nation, and we're going to start with the hardest question first. What is good government? Define it.
So here's my really geeky answer. I think that the business of government is not economic prosperity. I think that that is only a proxy for what the real business of government is, and that is human flourishing. And I think that human flourishing has lots of different parts to it, but I think that two things you have to be very sensitive to when you're talking about human flourishing are, one, government is it's a reward of civilization. It's the reason we came down. It's how we got organized, were able to build cities, stopped having to be hunter-gatherers. And so given that that's the case, government should be able to provide order. It should be able to let people rub shoulders in dense spaces, but it should also be lifting up the things that are the rewards of civilization, which is to say arts and culture. So I think good government keeps its eye on human flourishing, but also then I think that in America we have really impoverished our language around government. We tend to talk about everything as though it's about economics, and sadly I'll even have arts groups come in and they'll come in with an economic study that shows that whatever art they want to do is good for the economy. Well, I think that's putting it backwards, and I think that's true for education too. The goal of education, from my perspective, the highest goal of education is to make us better human beings. It's not to help us get, jobs in finance. So I think that government should have its eye on those things, but it should also talk the language of morality, because morality is the question of, what does it mean to be a good human? And so questions of justice are things that government always has to be really focused on, because if we're all wealthy but not living fulfilled lives, that can't be the goal. So I think good government's got to be focused on human flourishing.
If people are frustrated with government, especially if they're frustrated with you and your administration, what should they do?
Well, I think the first answer is they should, maybe it's just how I feel right now, but do a little research, because a lot of time it seems to me the media, not you, but there's a tendency of media in general to conflict cells, to come up with a narrative that involves a black and white division, which is maybe true, maybe not, to muddy details so that you can present a conflict that then gets people frustrated. So the first thing they should do is ask themselves, what are the actual facts in the situation? If there are well-intentioned people trying hard to get to the good result here, what am I criticizing, and do I have all the information? The second thing they should do is get engaged, because the nice thing about being in the democracy we have is it's not hard to get engaged.
Yeah, but it's hard. Yeah, but it's hard.
Yeah,
it takes time. I don't have time for that.
Yeah, it depends on well, if you don't, then you're abdicating democracy. You have to take responsibility for the fact that there's a certain amount of throwdown that's involved in living in a democratic republic. We've got to be willing to engage, and we got to be willing to think that problems, you can't outsource things to the government. Being frustrated at the government is, I think, one of the two twin perils that we face right now, and it's the temptation to opt out, to say that's something the government should do, not something we should do. So the late Barney Frank, who just died, had this quote which I loved, which was, government is just the word for the things we do together. So nice. If government as the thing we do together, then we have to do it, and we involves the person who thinks they're frustrated. So there are always things that we can do to move things towards a more positive outcome and to progress. So we should take ownership.
So you're a public prosecutor. You were a member of city council. Now you're mayor. What drew you to public service?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer, to give you the very personal, honest answer, here it is. My faith tradition is Christian, and there is a haunting passage in the New Testament where people are standing in front of their Creator and being held accountable for things. And, the question is, did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? And did you visit people in prison? which is a doable list of things to work on. And I realized that, I was fortunate enough to have a decent analytical brain, to be healthy enough to knock doors, to have a community that loved me and supported me. And so staying home and, watching football and television was not a morally acceptable response to the gifts I was given. And so, I've been incredibly blessed. And I think that if you're sensitive to your place in the universe and understand your blessings, you have an obligation to try to do good for others and to work on the common good.
Who inspires you? Do you have a political hero?
Oh, Jimmy Carter's one of my political heroes. Abraham Lincoln is a political hero. I got to meet Carter before he died. I did not get a chance to meet Nelson Mandela before he died. Desmond Tutu is a hero. And Wendell Berry, he's more of a prophet than he is a political actor. But, I come from a family of activists, so I come by it honestly.
All right.
My family was always involved in justice issues.
Were you president of your high school class?
No, although I was the head. I did get involved in a mock election in college. But, then I took a step back and I thought, why would you, if you're 25, it's a little weird to ask people to vote for you if you haven't done anything.
All right.
So I went and did some things.
All right, good. So you've been in public service for quite some time. What would you like people to know about government as a government insider that they probably don't know?
The amount of inertia that's involved. The fact that government is a very, very cautious entity. I tell kids this all the time. I say the most important thing kids can bring to a conversation is not answers that 50-year-olds haven't thought about things like street design necessarily, but a futurist vision. A vision of how can we do new things? Because the government is got a really strong bias towards yesterday wasn't a calamity, therefore let's make tomorrow look like yesterday, which gets us really, really stuck in decades-old dynamics where we take the status quo for granted. And that means, you got to be willing to shake the status quo. I mean, we already talked about cash bond, right? It's a medieval thing that we just kept doing for hundreds of years, which makes no sense. But we were doing it yesterday, so let's do it tomorrow. But you don't want to get, yes, we don't want to get too enamored of outside the box thinking, but government is a very, very conservative body and entity and organization by and large.
What's the best part of being mayor?
Oh, the best part is to be able to come up with new ideas and new visions and work with people. I always say, I think that properly understood, my job is being like a magnifying glass for sunlight. My job is to focus and catalyze the energy of the people in the community. And that's just fun. It's fun when people have ideas and you be like, wow, that is a great idea. Let's go do that. It happens to me at least once a week that someone comes in with an idea and I'm like, son of a gun, never thought of that before. That's awesome. Let's go figure that out.
What's your biggest fear? What keeps you up at night as mayor?
Not being able to get enough done.
All right. So I have never been to Grand Rapids. I've been to Detroit a few times, and I've been to the UP. What is your favorite place? And if I'm coming there, what's the local dish? What's the thing I have to try? What's the dish of Grand Rapids? And I understand that Grand Rapids is also called Beer City. So, let's put all that together.
Sure. My favorite places are you call them brew pubs. Because it is fun to be in a place that's actually brewing their own beer, or a cocktail bar, which I happen to own. But, a restaurant that's got an alcohol component, I got a soft spot for it. It's a really relaxed, friendly vibe.
Okay.
What I'd say if you're in Grand Rapids, I don't know, if you're here for a week, go see Lake Michigan. It's one of the wonders of the physical world. It's only 30 miles away.
All right.
If you're there for a day, go just walk the town. I mean, I love all cities. Maybe I shouldn't say it as a mayor because, I should say I only love Grand Rapids, but I'm just a city guy. I love going and getting to know cities, city by city by city. I can't tell you there's a city I don't like.
All right.
Some more than others, but the ones that are on the rise are the ones that are fun. The ones where you're like, wow, that's a cool thing. I want to take that idea home with me.
So lots of brew pubs in your city.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there a dish that you must have when you're in Grand Rapids? I mean, what about a Coney? Is that more of a Detroit thing?
We're Midwesterners. I'm a burger guy, and maybe it's summer, but I also think I don't know. Again, as a Northern European, I think that many other cultures do food much more interestingly than my ancestors did.
All right. Well, hey, listen, you don't have to talk me out of a burger and a beer at a brew pub. That's that's a day well spent. So this is the Good Government Show. We always bring it back to good government. You said that one of the things that excites you is a new idea. So tell me about a new idea that you're instituting in your city that either you came up with on your own or you're working with someone in your city who said, hey, Mr. Mayor, why don't we? Tell me about it.
Sure. Well, that mediation idea is a new one that I really did sort of come up with on my own, and I'm excited about that. I don't know any other cities that are doing that for those subclinical conflicts. Another idea I'm working on that I haven't seen done anywhere else yet is also in the justice space, and that is if we want our police officers to act like a lot of what they do kind of looks like social work, how about we start talking to our universities about a dual degree. I was a double major in history and philosophy. Well, what if you could be a double major in criminal justice and social work? And we could hire those folks into our police force. I think that's an exciting idea that I'm talking with our local universities about, and I hope we can get some traction on over time. So those are both in the justice space.
I think I see your next career after mayor, being a professor of criminal justice and social work.
Well, I do love the intersection of that space. I'll tell you.
All right.
So you want another one, or
sure? Or no. I want to hear all the good government you got.
Okay. So here's another one I have not seen done anywhere inside of a city, but it's obvious once you think about it. I had a friend who came. I stole this idea from a friend. I don't know how much you get out in New York City in cars, but in rural America, we figured out the beauty of rumble strips. Things you put down the middle of the road and things you put on the side of the road to wake you up if you're dozing or make you to pay attention if you cross the center line. You get that sound if you hit a rumble strip in a car.
Sure.
Okay. Well, why not use those to demark bike lanes where you can't put in a hard curb? It's a great idea.
Yes.
You can snow plow over them. They're not an impediment to snow removal. They're not an impediment to street cleaning. So I have lots of bike lanes in my town that are only demarcated with a white bit of paint. Well, if a car could hear a when they got into a bike lane, it would keep the bike safer. And they cost rumble strips are cheap.
Well, in New York, they use bike lanes for loading and unloading zones.
Yeah, I know. But they use the sidewalks for bike lanes. I know. And every Uber, every Grubhub guy in Manhattan is running you over in an electric bike. I know.
Yes, true. All true.
But in a city that's not as dense, where you've got space for bike lanes and where where you can hope that they'll be observed, a rumble strip is such a cheap way to up your game, and it's going to have some positive benefits. So we haven't gotten around to implementing any of those in Grand Rapids, but it was an idea I got from a constituent friend, and I want to see it happen as soon as I can get the architecture in place and get the engineers to believe that it's okay. And, I just don't see any reason to not do it.
All right. Well, you've got your work cut out for you. You've got a lot of ideas and a lot of stuff you want to get done. So good luck with that. The mayor of Grand Rapids, David LeGrand, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure talking with you and sharing some really good government ideas. So thanks for joining.
No, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The Good Government Institute has a new partner, the Charles F. Kettering Foundation. I really like their podcast, The Context, and I bet you will too. They have a new series called Democracy Under Construction. The show is hosted by historian Alex Lovett, and he looks back at the first 250 years of U.S. history. Alex digs into the moments that have pushed us towards an inclusive democracy. You can find it wherever you're listening right now, or visit kettering.org and give him a follow. Want to hear more about good government? Check out another show I host, Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. I host the show with Brad Kavanaugh, mayor of Dubuque, Iowa, and the immediate past president of the Iowa League of Cities. Together, we talk to leaders in Iowa cities. We talk about what works and what good government looks like in Iowa. Join us right here where you're listening now. That's Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. What if Lincoln hadn't been shot? What if World War I hadn't happened? Jim Ludlow, Good Government Show executive producer, explores both those ideas in 2 books. In Lincoln, Beyond the Bullet, he imagines that Lincoln lives. In Royal Cousins, he imagines what would have happened if 3 kings, all cousins, hadn't blundered their way into war. What if? Think about it. Go to goodgovinstitute.org/books and order a copy. I've heard a lot of great answers to the question, what is good government? And Grand Rapids Mayor David LeGrand gave me an answer I've never heard before. He said, quote, "The business of government is not economic prosperity, but human flourishing." That's a very good way to think about what government does and can do. He went on to say that government isn't just about economics. He said essentially arts and culture don't have to make money or add to a city's bottom line. They can just be for people to enjoy. A nice perspective, at least I think so. A lot of good ideas from the mayor. His plan to intervene in conflicts before they escalate, that's a good idea. Just one of the many good ideas the mayor has. And if a man who owns a distillery says his favorite place is a brew pub and a burger, well, who am I to argue? Sounds pretty good to me. That's our show. Thanks for listening. Please like us and share us with your friends and review us right here where you're listening. And check out our website, goodgovernmentshow.com, for extras. Help us keep telling stories of good government in action everywhere. Join us again for another episode right here. I'm Dave Martin, and this is The Good Government Show. The Good Government Show is produced by the Good Government Institute, a nonprofit organization promoting civic engagement and civic education. All donations to the show help promote trust in government. You can donate at goodgovinstitute.org. That's goodgovinstitute.org. Executive producers are Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder. Jason Stershik is our editor and producer. Join us again to hear good stories about our government right here on The Good Government Show.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,